everyone. But let's focus on data engineer today. So first of all, we'll start with what is data compliance. Think of data compliance like the law. You have a law in, say, Nigeria, right, whereby when you go to rob, right, back then I don't know what it is now, but back then you're going to be dealt by firing squad. They had punishments for certain laws that were put in place to ensure that people complied to those laws. So data compliance is just like the law, but the law for data, right? But obviously, nobody's going to get killed, right? If not, Max Zuckerberg will be dead by now, right? That guy has flaunted a lot of data laws, right? But yeah, with certain regulatory bodies as regards to individuals' data. In this, let's say for instance, your say bank ABC, right? Bank A, you have you have the the data of your customer, and that data is exposed just for anyone to manipulate. Say, take for instance now, there are certain banks, right, in Nigeria, whereby someone will just call you, try to scam you. The only reason why these people can get your contact is because someone has leaked your data. And the only reason why someone has leaked your data is because the enforcement, the compliance regulatory bodies that are supposed to enforce these laws are not as active as they should be. So people are leaking people's data, trying to scam people, right? So you have that's where data compliance comes into place, to ensure that certain laws are put into place to prevent the data of individuals or of the customers to certain organizations from being used against them, right? There was a story, back then in while my former place of work, of a guy who liked a lady, right? And rather than just approach her the normal way, I think he got her number from the system and called her and started chatting with her. When she asked, he openly, said that this was how he got her number. And this lady reported the guy, and the guy lost his job, right? Because the guy flaunted certain rules, right? Now it could have been worse if this lady went to say a regulatory body that's supposed to protect people's data, right? The Not just the guy would have been in trouble, but the company would have had to pay hefty fines. So data compliance are a set of rules or regulations that organizations have to follow to ensure that data is handled in a certain way. If data is not handled in that certain way, then there will be consequences. A lot of times it's fines. A lot of times it's fines. So for European countries, we have GDPR, right? Yeah, I think it's for European countries, and we have a couple of other regulatory bodies, right? And if a company is, let's say, in Nigeria now, wants to interact with, say, companies do business, of course they need to get a license to operate, say, in America. But you trying to get that license to operate in America, that means you're trying to do business with American citizens. You'd also have to comply to their own data compliance compliant bodies, right? So say GDPR, you want to interact with Europeans, you have to, you know be compliant with GDPR policies, or else you face the consequences. In Nigeria, we have NDPR, I think Nigerian Data Protection Agency, regulatory regulation or something like that, right? But I've actually gone through the NDPR before. That's like 2019, 2020, and they had sets of rules. Each rule had certain consequences. Most times it was really just fines, right? So there's that. And so we've spent the last couple of minutes talking about data compliance. Now let us speak to what data governance is and what is data governance. Well, data governance are really the processes. So remember, first of all, we have what must be enforced, or the rules and regulations that has been set from the regulatory bodies. Now we need to have the processes that ensures that organizations are compliant to those rules and regulations, right? So for instance now, let's say let's say that robbery is a crime, right? And you're a parent, you don't want your child to be an armed robber. So you now have to govern your child to ensure your child does not hang out with bad boys or bad guys that will influence you to be an armed robber, right? So you're putting in a structure and a process to ensure that your child turns out excellent. So in the same way, organizations will have to put structures and processes to ensure that they are employees do not flaunt the data, compliance rules, right? I hope that makes sense. And a lot of times, although while there are compliant bodies outside of the organization that are trying to audit the organization are going to have what we call something called an internal audit team that will audit their own processes within the organization and ensure that everybody is compliant to, in this case now, the data compliance regulations, right? That's every structured organization is supposed to have that. And within the context of a data engineer must ensure that the way he processes his data is in compliance to how it's supposed to be, the way the data is secure, right? And the reason why for that is because a data engineer built the infrastructure of the analytics system. And what that means is that if you're familiar with what you call Power BI, what you call Tableau, where you build all your charts, now all of these charts comes from a data warehouse, right? I mean, data must come from somewhere, right, before you can see the ultimate results, right? So the data engineers are the ones that build these data warehouses. And so because of that, think of a data warehouse like a room, right? You have to determine who you let into that room. So a data engineer determines who has access to what, and who has access to see what, and who has access to pull what, right? That's to get the data and put it on the dashboard. So a data engineer has a lot of control or a lot of this thing to ensure that data does not go into the wrong hands, data is processed in a quality manner, right? And certain parts of sensitive data should not be seen by just anyone, right? And so, 1 minute, sorry. And so, you know, we'll be looking at the specifics of what a data engineer does in terms of data governance that ensures that he's compliant to the data compliance rules, right? And so first of all, we're going to start with access control, right? So remember I said that a data engineer, right, is most times, not every time, but most times in charge of the data warehouse. He's the one that gives permissions, that gives roles, that gives privileges to people. And what are roles and privileges? So think about roles and privileges like a house. I am the one that built this house. So definitely it will only make sense for me to have all of the keys to the house, or at least the spare keys to the house. Now, you people are tenants in my own house. So what that means is that some of you will have access to your own individual rooms, but you will not have access to other people's rooms. So I'm the one that will now say, okay, this is your own access. You take your own access. You take your own access. Then maybe I now have a caretaker. I want to think that my caretaker, you will also have access to these people's rooms, except my own room. So I'm creating certain roles and privileges based on certain. Sometimes it could be based on certain people's role in the organization. So let's say you're a data analyst. I will now tell you, okay, you have access to this database because you are going to need to get data out of this database. Basically just things like that, right? And so that's basically what access control is all about. Trying to control the level of access is people who have based on their role within the organization. Sometimes it could be level of access based on what you should see and what you should not see. Sometimes it could be based on the kind of roles that you can perform or you cannot perform. So for instance now, some people can write data into a data warehouse. What that means is that you're adding data to a data warehouse. But some people should not be allowed to write data. Why? Because their only business is just to read the data. They don't have any business adding data. Just read what is already there. So you'd want to do something called the least level privilege. And what that means is that let me give you the minimum allowance that you need, or the minimum rights that you need. If you need more rights, come back and ask me for it, right? That way you're very safe, right? Please, if you have any question, you can just stop me along the way. And so you also have another process that a data engineer will undergo, which is called data classification. All right, and data classification are done in various ways depending on, say, the company style or method, right? And the summary of the gist is this: that you're trying to classify your data based on sensitivity of your data, right? So you want to, you know, so for instance now, when some of us were growing up, we were sensitive about our age. We didn't want some people to, know that we're younger than our peers, right? Because we didn't want them to look down on us. So our age was sensitive to us, right? Or things like just basically things that you will not just tell anybody. Now imagine that you open an account with a company and you have to put all of those informations, and then they allow just anyone see that information, you feel offended. Or let's say your account balance leaks to the public, you feel offended. So you have to label, or let's say your ATM pin, right? That's really sensitive. So you will have to label each data by the class of sensitivity. So there are some data, like for instance now, some data are not really sensitive, e.g. your name is not really sensitive. Everyone should know your name. You're not hiding your name from anyone when you're not like a criminal or a fugitive, so anyone can see your name. But there are certain things that are now sensitive, like your address. Imagine an armed robber gets hold of your address, right? So for each level of this, there will be a level of sensitivity that is applied, especially when it comes to credit information. Now if you're dealing with financial organization, when it comes to credit information, that is most times always classified, right? Always, in fact, a lot of people don't even sit at the back end. They always have to hash it and asterisk it and things like that, right? All right. And so you also have what you call encryption. And encryption just means that if your password is, say, ABCDE, I'm going to encrypt your password to look like hash dot cycle 2FA MP3 JJ full stop comma again and things like that. So this is where your password comes into place. I don't want certain sensitive information to be seen, right? So I'm going to now add an additional layer of security to now hash all of those things. But although this is, in my experience, I'm speaking based on my experience now, this is most likely what a software engineer will do at the back end when you're registering. So it's from the database level. So we have what you call a transactional database and an analytical database. A transactional database, for instance, you open your account, you're trying to do some things, right? So your record enters a transactional database because a transactional database deals with production processes. So what are production processes? When I'm trying not to be too technical. So when a product goes live, right? And so let's say you open an account with Jumia, right? And you're trying to interact with Jumia. You're interacting with Jumia from a technical point of view on a production basis. Each interaction gets registered somewhere on the database, right? But that data, so but people need to see more information about this guy. I need to know who this guy is. I need to know, who are my customers, right? Organizations need to know who their customers are so they can make decisions based on their customers. So transactional databases which stores this data will become slow and heavy to process this data so I can get real life information about my customers. So analytical databases now solves that problem by now saying, okay, get me the data that you from the transactional database, right? So if for instance now I say I want to see information about, let's say, Oyesomi Toyosi, right? Transactional database can take, say, 2 minutes. I'm just giving an example. Analytical data warehouse will take, say, 2 seconds. So people want to see information now, 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 right? So that's where analytical with data warehouse come into play. And the reason why I came off here was because I was discussing encryption, and I'm saying that a lot of times from the database level, the production database level, these guys have already encrypted a lot of these things. But maybe of course there are still some things that will need encrypting, right? On a warehouse level, so people don't see some certain things, so that the analyst or whoever is pulling the information to a maybe ad hoc request. Ad hoc is like a one-time request, download your data to CSV or something like that. Or let's say dashboard, you're trying to build reports and all, right? So sometimes you might want to either hide some columns or just basically hash them, right? And you also have what you call data validation. Now, what is data validation? Now, imagine now that CBN is requesting for data of how much you've made for the year, or let's say how many customers you've gotten, and you go and let's say you've made 5 million customers, right? You onboarded 5 million customers, but you turn that you onboarded 50,000, or let's say you made 5 billion naira profit, right? But you turn that you made 2 billion. And to be honest, not because you made a mistake, not because you wanted to cheat them intentionally, but because you made a mistake, right? You If they eventually discover that you were lying or you made a mistake or you gave incorrect information, they would not now come and say, yeah, give us the right information. No, they'll say you are trying to dupe us or whatever, because it's going to determine the kind of commissions or whatever remittances you're supposed to give us, things like that, right? So you'd realize that for every process that is carried out, there must be validation. So validation is just to ensure that the data that you are doing is
Verify you.
accurate, right? Or is updated,
Mm.
right? So there will have to be some validation processes that will be have to be carried out to catch certain potential errors, right? And things like that. So data engineer will have to build like test cases to ensure that their data is accurate, basically. All right. And so, of course, you also have what you call data cleaning. So, data cleaning just means checking for duplicates, right? And things like that. Because the thing with duplicates is that if, for example, you did a transaction once but it's showing two times, right? By the time you add the amount you did for those two times, you're getting errors already.
Mm.
So, data cleaning processes too is important. And then data documentation. Data documentation is something that people don't enjoy doing until. Hello, someone say something. All right. So data documentation processes are processes that people don't enjoy doing until they need to. And the reason for that is because, of course, when you do a project, tell yourself that I remember now, I remember. Right. Then after like 2 years, 3 years, somebody now comes back and say, hey, remember that work that you did? And we need some update on that work. And then when you look at the work, you be like, did I do that thing? Sometimes it's even bad because the your level of growth is different. So let's say before you're writing your code like you're a lunatic, and then after 3 years you have a little bit of more maturity and experience, and then you look back at your code and it's giving you headache. So documentations always help to give you an overview or a thought process behind your code, right? So data documentation is very important at different levels. Important at a code level, important at the data dictionary level, and important at the data catalog level. Now, at the code level is you simply trying to document your code, trying to explain what your code does, the objective of your code, the processes to get that code, bring that code to life, right? Very important. Second one, and also when you resign from the company, a sane human being that can think should be able to look at your documentation and should be able to interpret your documentation. Now, in data dictionary is simply you now saying that okay, this data warehouse that I've created, I have 5 tables. I have 17 columns. In table A, this is what column A is doing. This is what column B is doing. This one is talking about. This one is talking about this. So that when you leave and somebody wants to take over, the person can go through that data documentation and I say, oh, okay. So this is what this is for. This is what this is for. Imagine that you have 500 tables that you've built as a data engineer, and somebody just joins your company and you have left, and they tell the person do this, but you have done that in 2 years ago, but the person does not know. That's where data documentation now comes into play. The person now starts going through it and say, okay, so we have this, we have that. So what is data catalog? Data catalog is a combination of dictionaries. Data dictionary is a dictionary for one warehouse. Data catalog is a combination. You're bringing these dictionaries from different warehouses together on one view. So a lot of times it's most likely on like a UI surface, like just like a web interactive surface, whereby all you have to do is select the data source or the data warehouse, then type for, let's say, the data dictionaries, and then you see a list of data dictionaries for per table or something like that, right? So that's what it is, right? So so data catalog, a combination of data dictionaries put together in like a UI where you can simply interact, right? But a lot of organizations don't have data catalogs, right? But organizations should have data dictionaries. Very important. All right. And so yeah, so I think we have come to the end already, right? So data compliance and data governance are very important, right, for modern driven data organizations, right? You have to ensure that you're up to date with the best practice. So for instance, now there is no reason why as data engineer you're trying to create an ETL pipeline is extract transform node. What that means is that if you register your account on Jumia and the company wants to see information on all their customers, I have to move the data from where it was registered on Jumia to something called analytical data warehouse where it can be processed for analysis, right? So if I imagine I'm trying to get data from Jumia to this thing and I put my username plain, I put my password plain, that's stupidity, right? So you have to now go through the best practices to encrypt your passwords and all of those things, or to we use something called Apache Airflow, right? Apache Airflow has like something where you can you can create your connection securely, right? Whereby nobody, not even you that's created it, can see it, right? The password will just show blank, right? But underneath at the server level, of course, it's there. So whenever you're pulling it, there's some unhashing that goes on behind the scenes and things like that, right? So basically, just stay in, just ensure you follow best practices when you're doing, as regards to data governance and this thing, and compliance, right? So I think that's it. I don't know if you guys have any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's such a nice uh, uh, the presentation, sir. So the question I would like to ask, talking about data compliance or talking about data itself, people believe like, oh, as in maybe for example, I'm moving into data space, and I felt like taking a career along the data, of course, the data space. We felt like because data is the future. We all know that everything we are doing now, data is very very important, isn't it? Is as an individual. So how do you get
Hmm.
how do you advise a beginner that is just starting today or that will start soon to take a career as to take a data as a career? Do you think he's expected to know some programming language as a data coming into a data space? Do you think he's expected to know just a simple software and from there he can get started? Because if I'm a product designer, for example, and I feel like, oh, going to data spaces requires me to know programming language, requires me to know Python, requires me to know a lot of frameworks and everything regarding the data. Do you think I can move into it while I'm even doing something else in the tech space already?
Yeah, you can always transition into data, right? But I would always ask, especially if you already have a good career, I would always ask your motive for wanting to transition. If your motive is money, and then I'll tell you to hold on first, because that you make a lot of money. Of course, I've seen exceptions. I know someone that, when I was leaving my former place of work, we interviewed, and within a year, she's already earning almost a million. Yeah, almost a million. Right. And that's because she was really impressive, right? She impressed the person. So there are exceptions, right? But designer or whatever, you earn, let's say, give or take 600, rough estimation. You could any more than that, and you want to transition into data engineering. Understand that you have to start at surface level, except of course you want to combine your products and also, but the general gist is person does in your first 2 years, right? A newbie, of course. I would you what should you do, right? um what kind of, it depends on this. You don't really, what you need is SQL anyway. Some people consider SQL a programming language, other people don't. So I think that's all for debate. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. So, talking about
You need SQL. Okay.
okay, okay, yes, you saying something. I think I have a network issue.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So sorry. So I was saying that as a data engineer, you need Python, you need SQL, you need probably one of those big data tools. You don't really need it, but it's good to have. Some companies, data engineering can be quite technical. Some companies will request Docker, orchestrating framework to automate your processes like Airflow. Of course, you should know GitHub a little, how to basic push and pull out those things. But if you're there, they really pass. But yeah, essentials Python, SQL, then learn. I think you're good to go.
Okay, thank you very much. That's such a brilliant what's it called? So talking about some organization to work as a data or maybe as a data beginners, for people that are just moving into the data space, trying to reach out to, like, okay, you know what, I want to translate into the data space, or I'm into the data space already, but I've not been able to find a space to, okay, where I can actually learn it in order for me to grow or to keep more of my, like you now, when you start learning, do you start as a self learning, or you start enroll in a training where you just have to reach out to people and say, you know what, I need this, I needed to get this, I needed to get that, rather than we that there are people that definitely might not really up to that task of having somebody to teach them or to let them know that, oh, this is what the data engineer is having to do, is self learning by themselves. What do you recommend, sir?
Well, I would recommend you follow my route. I recommend you get a mentor. When I said I didn't have a mentor, I had to learn a lot myself and had to get a job by proving myself. Although when I got a job, I realized that if I just had a mentor, I'd have been better prepared for the job, right? But yeah, I was when it came to a lot of other people in my set, I think I knew one of the least, right? But I was willing to put in the work to learn more, right? I basically did a lot of my learning on the job, right? But yeah, I self learned. I would advise people right now. And to be honest, when I first started, I'd never heard of machine learning, data engineering. I think it wasn't necessarily a new concept, but relatively as compared to now, it was a very relatively newer concept in quotes, right? When you're comparing to now you see a lot of data analysts, you see a lot of data engineers, right? Back then, you wouldn't see as much, right? So back then, I didn't have a mentor. I wouldn't advise you to go my route. I always advise people to get a mentor. I know this guy that was trying to learn it for close to a year to 2 years, and he would try, get frustrated, stop. But I mentored him by January ending. Right now, he has a job, right? He got a job after like a year. I know another person that I just started mentoring early beginning of this year. He's gotten an internship, right? So yeah, there are people like that, and that's because they would want to waste weeks of their life, on things that don't matter, and I'll tell them no, go here, go there, right? So what a mentor simply does for you is that he shortens your learning curve. He reduces the number of mistakes that you would have learned, if you didn't have him, things like that. So my first rule is always get a mentor. But of course, you wouldn't just get anyone. You need to get someone that cares about your growth, right? And don't just say I want you to be my mentor. Please don't do that. The person has some years of experience, right? And the person is a busy person. The person has looks like he has things going for him. Don't just say I want to be a mentor. Um, Try to tell the person what you've done. The person has to believe that you're serious about what you want, because a lot of people come and meet me. I want to learn this. After investing like a week or two of my time, I'm now the one chasing you. I wouldn't do that for anyone again. So I have to see the level of work you've put in, and I must be impressed by it. To know that you are committed to this thing, that nothing will take you from this thing. Because it's also my time, right? So yeah, there's that, right? So at least if you're not paying your mentor, right, it wouldn't hurt. At least this is just a free gift, a free advice to anyone listening. It won't hurt to appreciate the person once in a while, right? Any person know that you appreciate what they do for you, right? Don't just say thank you. Buy credit 500 naira, send a nice text, right? Don't have a relationship that whereby you're just taking, right? And you don't try to give back, right? At least an appreciation. Say thank you very much, right? Because the guy is busy, right? But he still takes out his time for you, right? So always learn to appreciate your mentors. Very important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir, for that. I really appreciate it. Emmanuel, you have a question. You can have the mic.
Uh, Mr. Victor,
Uh,
I am and something.
I'm having trouble
Uh,
hearing you. I don't know if it's me or
Yes, I can hear you too.
can you hear me?
Yes, yeah. Are you using the
are you using it?
earpiece?
I think it's quite.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, better.
Okay. So I said I am a full stack JavaScript developer right now. now,
Mm-hmm.
but I have interest in data and AI. You understand? And I don't care about the time it takes to get into this field, like seriously get into the field. So, but the question that I have in my mind right now is it something that I should actually invest my time and my effort into, or should I just continue in what I'm just doing? Because I think AI and this is something that is really hot out there in the market. So I don't know. I need advice. You get? I enjoy
But
what I'm doing currently right now, but I also need to know what is out there in the market. So I don't know if
okay,
you understand what I
so
mean.
I understand what you're saying, but I like to say this: when it comes to a man's purpose and a man's destiny and what a man's whatever a man wants to do, I don't think anyone can will be in the best position to tell you what you need to do. I think you would need to, right? But I can give you a couple of guidelines for trying to find clarity in what you need to do. First of all, I'll ask you to check your motive. Why are you doing what you're doing? First of all, analyze and construct where you are right now. Are you doing well? Is there a bright future in what you're doing? Right. Secondly, I'll ask you, why do you need to do what you want to do? Are you just chasing the next hot thing in the market? If you are, what's the probability that you won't then chase the next hot thing again? Right. So check your motive. Right. It's very important to check your motive. Thirdly speaking, consider yourself again. Is your career going to be in extinction? If the answer is no, um why do you why do you really want to move? If you are I can't have any don't have, let's say you are an accountant, although I think some countries, developed countries, still pay the accountants well anyway. But let's say you're an accountant in Nigeria, I can understand why you, or your customer service, no offense to anyone that does that job, please, or let's say you're customer service personnel, like your contract staff, right? I can understand you trying to transition, right? It's very important that you do, right? But when you are a say when you are a